Hello everyone, I'm the 12th Women's World Chess Champion Alexandra Kostyniuk and I welcome you to the second video of my video series Absolutely Must Know Endgames for Chess.com. And today we're gonna talk about, well, a rare endgame. I must tell you that this one I only faced once in my entire career, and I've played several thousand of chess games. It's about two knights endgame, two knights versus king. We'll start with two knights versus king, and for this one, I must tell you, this one is a draw. So if you have two knights versus lonely king, I know it's unfair. I mean, even chess can be unfair. You have two extra pieces, but it is a draw. Unless your opponent, for example, in this position, steps into checkmate, steps into the corner, blunders, and gets checkmated. So it is theoretically possible to win in two knights versus lonely king. But that happens only if you or your opponent blunders. If black doesn't want to get checkmated, he can go king f8, and it is a draw. So if you have two knights versus lonely king, or if you're playing with a lonely king, it's a draw. And actually, if you play on chess.com, your game will be declared automatically a draw if this position or any other position with two extra knights, with two knights versus lonely king arise. But adding a small pawn changes everything. And that's when it gets to start getting more difficult and actually with more chances for two knights. So as long as your opponent has an extra pawn, it can help you to win. For example, let's look at this position. What's important, it's always important, that black's king is almost in the corner. Of course, in order to checkmate, as I said in the first video, you need to have the king of the weakest side in the corner. So here, the king is almost there. First knight secures the square, so the king cannot escape. And white's king also secures the black king. So king just needs to wait. And white plays knight to e4. It's possible to move a pawn. d2. Knight goes to f6. Check. King h8. Knight to e7. And imagine the same position with no pawn. It would be a stalemate. But alas, the pawn is here. It has a chance for her dream to happen. It gets promoted into a queen, but white delivers a checkmate. It's a checkmate. And that's why having a pawn versus two knights, actually, it's not good for the weakest side. If you are defending position versus two knights, you need to try to get rid of this pawn as soon as possible, or to push it as fast as possible to the first or eighth rank. One more example, you can try to actually solve it on your own. It's why to move, how to win this game. It's quite an easy one. So white gives a check, knight c5 check. There are several moves possible, so let's study all of them. If king goes to a7, king c7, and again, the problem for black that this pawn is here, so it's not possible to stalemate. b3, knight a3, b2, knight b5, king a8, knight d7, and b1 queen, knight b6. Let's get back. If the king goes to b8, unfortunately, it also doesn't help black. Knight a5, b3, knight c6, and we see how knights coordinate, how knights work together very well. And there is only one square that is left for the black king. King goes to the corner, and that's what white wants and needs. King c8, very important, leaving the square for the knight. b2, knight a6, b1 queen, and knight c7. The queen is on the board, but it's too late. So that's how a stronger side often wins if the weaker side has this extra pawn there is a lot of theory about two knights versus one pawn. There was a very known chess composer, Alexei Troitsky, who analyzed this endgame in detail, and he figured out the so-called Troitsky line. He proved if black pawns are standing like this, not further than this line, and it has the knight blockading it somewhere. For example, if the pawn is on a4, white knight is on a3, theoretically it's possible to win. But sometimes it requires more than 100 moves to win. So yes, there is such a line. Yes, if there is a pawn versus two knights, there are great chances to win. But this journey for winning the game can be very tricky and difficult. But there are chances, and you can try. And I think that's all you really need to know. To finish this video, let's analyze, let's go over to examples from practical chess. One position is from my own game. I was playing white, and, well, I ended up in a worse endgame, but I was able to save myself, because in this position, even though my bishop is under attack, I don't mind to give up this bishop. What I wanted to do is to exchange this pawn, and I played b4. And even though I do have one pawn versus two knights, it's not enough in this particular situation to win the game. So my opponent tried to win it, but you see, when I had a chance, I tried to push it forward, so it gives less possibilities to maneuver for the stronger side. Knight d5, king a7, knight c7. During the game, I had no idea whether this position is drawn or lost, but of course, I did whatever I could do. I tried to escape from the corner. It's always dangerous to stay in the corner. My opponent tried to maneuver and to find a winning combination, to push my king to the corner and then use some extra tempi that she can get because of this pawn, but it was not possible, and quite fast we agreed on a draw. She took the pawn, she played knight d5, and it's a beautiful stalemate. It's a beautiful stalemate. And one more practical example. This one is between Veselin Topalov and Anatoly Karpov. So two very strong grandmasters, two former world champions, and let's see how this game proceeded. Knight takes d4, Karpov sacrificed the knight takes d4, and this position is theoretically a drawn position. So I checked with table base. You can check it out as well on chess.com. There is an option, table base tab, where it shows exactly how to evaluate position with 7 chess pieces or less. But let's see how the game proceeded. So king c3, king c5, king d3, knight d2, e2. So far so good. It's still a draw. King c4, king c2, knight d4 check. And here comes a blunder, a very serious mistake. Karpov makes the move king to b2. And again, sometimes there is no need to know some concrete lines, winning or drawing. You need to know and understand general principles of any chess game. And general principles tells us that you need to keep your king in the center. Try to avoid corners and edges of the board as long as possible. So knight d2, king d2 or king d1 here would save a game, most likely. But after king to b2, the position is lost. Okay, it's very complicated. It's challenging to find the winning way, but let's see how the game proceeds. King to b4. If the king goes to c1, white wins by playing king to c3, king to b1, and here very beautiful maneuvers of this knight start. The knight actually goes around in circles, and actually somehow magically, to me it's complete magic, this one knight forces the king to get to the corner. So knight e3, let's just enjoy, because it's impossible to memorize. Knight to c2, you see, cutting off the king from the center. King to c1, knight to e3, again securing this square, not letting the king escape. King to b1, knight c4, circles and circles, but circles, they become smaller and smaller. Knight to b2, again, not letting the king escape. King b1, knight to d3, taking under control this square. King to a2, and now king to b4. Again, somehow the king controlled these two squares. The knight controls b2 and c1. So the king is getting to the corner, and finally, when the king is in the corner, this knight joins the action. Knight to e2. And you see how important it is that this pawn is still alive, because after g3, knight c3, almost stalemate, but almost, because this pawn has moves to make g2, knight b4, g1, knight c2 checkmate. A very beautiful line, and actually something similar happened in the game. But let's get back to the game. After king to b4, king to a2 happened. And here, as we know, as we may remember, knight b5 and knight to a3 was a winning idea. But Topalov played knight d to f5, a move in the wrong direction, and actually there is a very interesting position of mutual Zugzwang that can arise. Again, this position is drawn theoretically, and black could have saved himself by playing king to b1, with the idea after knight to e3, play king to b2. And apparently this knight has to move, and thus giving this king a possibility to escape to the center. Or if this knight moves, then black will have a chance to move this pawn and to give it up, preferably. But in the game, black played king to b2, and after knight to e3, there is black to move, unfortunately, and every single move makes black's position worse. So king to a2, knight to c4, and similar maneuvers. We've seen this position already. The circles, beautiful circles of white knights start. King to c1, knight to b2, securing this d1 square. King to b1, knight to d3, securing this c1 square. King to a1. The king is in the corner. King to b3. King to b1, knight to e2. And Karpov resigned because after g3, knight c3 check. King a1, knight b4 will follow, g2, knight c2. A very interesting and instructional, I hope, endgame with two knight versus pawn. So to finish up this video, let's summarize what we've studied and learned. Two knights versus lonely king is a draw. Well, unless this lonely king steps into the corner and gets checkmated. If there is a pawn and one of the knights can blockade it, then there are chances to win. But it's quite difficult and complicated. But I think if you know that there are chances, and if you have two knights and one of your knights can blockade this pawn, and the other knight with the king can try to push your opponent's king to the corner, you might give it a try and maybe win in this rare endgame. So good luck in your games, and see you in the next videos.